3. Ethical limits. The third thing that becomes evident from these verses is that war cannot be waged in the way of God by disregarding ethical limits. Moral values have to be given priority over everything in all circumstances, and even in circumstances of war, the Almighty has not given any person the permission to breach ethical principles. The verses assert that Muslims can fight the enemy and can displace them from the city from which they themselves were displaced, and that they should be killed wherever found. Muslims were allowed to take this step because of the reign of oppression and injustice let loose by the enemy, and because the truth of Muhammad's message had been made manifest to them and they deliberately denied it. However, two things must still remain in their consideration. Firstly, Muslims should not initiate proceedings to violate anything sacred. Consequently, war is permitted near the Baytullah and in sacred months only if the enemy takes the initiative. Muslims can in no case commence such proceedings. Secondly, Muslims can answer any excess committed by the enemy by inflicting equal damage only. They have no right to go beyond this. They can wage war, but in no case are they allowed to exceed the limits and commit any excesses, for the Almighty is greatly displeased by such an attitude. He only helps those who never cross the limits set by Him in any circumstances. In the verse under discussion, both these stipulations are discussed by the Quran in its unrivaled style. الشهر الحرام بالشهر الحرام والحرمات قصاص فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين. A sacred month for a sacred month. Similarly, other sacred things too are subject to retaliation. Therefore, if anyone transgresses against you, you should also pay back in equal terms. Have fear of God, and keep in mind that God is with those who remain within the bounds stipulated by religion. Surah number 2, verse 194. While explaining this verse, Amin Ahsan Islahi writes, this verse implies that fighting in the forbidden months or fighting within the boundaries of the haram is a major sin. However, if the disbelievers disregard their sanctity, Muslims, on account of qisas, also have the right to strip them of the protection that these sacred entities afford them. The life of every person carries great sanctity in the eyes of the Shari'ah. However, when a person violates this sanctity and kills someone, he himself shall be deprived of the right of sanctity for his own life to avenge his own deed. Similarly, the sanctity of the forbidden months and of the haram itself shall be upheld in all circumstances on the condition that the disbelievers also uphold it and do not oppress and tyrannize people in them. However, if they unsheath their swords in the forbidden months and in the sacred land of Mecca, then on account of qisas, they themselves shall deserve to be divested of the protection these months and this land hold for them. The verse goes on to say that just as taking of qisas for the forbidden months is necessary, the qisas of other sacred entities must also be taken. In other words, if the disbelievers deprive Muslims of the right of protection that certain things hold for them, Muslims too have the right, as a result of qisas, to pay them back in the same coin or measure. Consequently, whatever measures the disbelievers adopt in violation of the sanctity of the haram and the forbidden months, Muslims too can retaliate, but they must fear God and retaliate on equal footings. They should neither initiate such violations nor exceed the limits while retaliating against any aggression in this regard. Only those people become worthy of divine help who are fearful of the Almighty in all circumstances. Amin Ahsan Islahi, Tadabbur-e-Quran, Volume 3, page 479. The most important directive that has been spelled out in the sphere of ethical limits is the fulfillment of promises. Breaking a promise is a great sin in the eyes of the Almighty. He has made it amply clear to the Muslims that in both forms of qital, that is against injustice and oppression, and against the rejectors of truth after the truth has become evident to them, Muslims must not break any treaty contracted with the nation. Surah Tawbah is the surah that announced punishment for those who deliberately rejected Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his message. In this surah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been directed to declare null and void all pacts and treaties and embark upon a final assault against the disbelievers. However, it is explicitly stated in the surah that all treaties that have been concluded with a time frame must continue till the time period is over. Similarly, in Surah Anfal, Muslims are emphatically told that even if a nation with which Muslims are under obligation of a contract is guilty of oppressing the Muslims in matters of their religion, the Islamic State does not have the right to help these Muslims if this amounts to a breach of contract made with that nation. The Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يُهَاجِرُوا مَا لَكُم مِّن وِلَايَتِهِم مِّن شَيْءٍ حَتَّى يُهَاجِرُوا وَإِنِ اسْتَنصَرُوكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ فَعَلَيْكُمُ النَّصْرُ إِلَّا عَلَى قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُم مِّيثَاقٌ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. And to those who accepted faith but did not migrate, you owe no duty of protection to them until they migrate. But if they seek your help in religion, it is your duty to help them, except against a people with whom you have a treaty of mutual alliance, and God sees what you do. Surah number 8, verse 72. On a number of occasions, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ stressed how dreadful a sin breach of promise is. Abu Sa'id radhiyallahu anhu narrates from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, on the day of judgment, to proclaim the traitorship of a traitor and the betrayal of a person who betrayed his words, a flag shall be hoisted, which would be as high as the extent of his traitorship. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also said, remember that no traitor or betrayer of promises is greater than the traitor who is the leader and ruler of people. Muslim, Al-Jami as-Sahih, page 770, hadith number 4538. Abdullah ibn Amr radhiyallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said, a person who kills a mu'ahid will not be able to smell the fragrance of paradise, even though its fragrance can be smelt from a place as far off as 40 years from it in distance. Muslim, Al-Jami as-Sahih, page 770, hadith number 4538. However, if Muslims fare any foul play and breach of contract from the opposite side, they, in the words of the Quran, can also terminate the treaty and throw the promise on their faces on equal footings. The Quran says, وَإِمَّا تَخَافَنَّ مِنْ قَوْمٍ خِيَانَةً فَانْبِذْ إِلَيْهِمْ عَلَى السَّوَاءِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْخَائِنِينَ. And if you fear any treachery from a people, throw back their covenant to them on equal terms. Certainly, God does not like the treacherous. Surah number 8, verse 58. While commenting on this verse, Amin Ehsan Islahi writes, the words ala sawa mean that Muslims are authorized to pay back their enemy in the same coin. This means that the retaliation from their side must not exceed the harm inflicted upon them. Some people have deduced from these words that the nullification of a treaty should necessarily be declared openly before the other party. I do not find this deduction to be very sound, as these words do not support it. However, this much can be inferred, that mere speculation should not impel a party to revoke it. This should only be done after some manifest proof of its violation from the other side. The use of the intensive word takhafanna in the verse lays credence to this claim. Moreover, the condition of ala sawa also highlights this aspect. Amin Ehsan Islahi, Tadabbur Quran, Volume 3, page 499. The Prophet is reported to have explained this aspect in the following words. If a nation concludes a treaty with some other, it should not change it in any sense until the time of the treaty expires, or if it fears some treachery from the other side. In these cases, it should throw the treaty before it by an open declaration on equal footings. At-Tirmidhi, Al-Jami al-Kabir, Volume 3, page 237, Hadith number 1580. Other directives which are mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith in this regard are the following. 1. A display of pomp and pride should be avoided when an army sets out for a battle. In Surah Anfal, where the Quran has asked the Muslims to spend more time in the remembrance of God when a war is at hand, it has also asked them to abstain from show and pomposity, something that is the way of people who are inebriated with the pride of their number and the resources and the arsenal they have. Such vanity and conceit are not befitting for the believers. Whether in the battlefield or outside it, the humility of servitude to the Almighty should always be their hallmark. The reason for this is that their war is not mere war. It is serving and worshipping the Almighty, and at all instances, this fundamental aspect should be taken into account by them. The Quran